Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Welcome to episode 82 of the Dreams and Drive podcast, and we are back at it with another listener question and answer. So when I did episode 81, I said, all right, I'm just going to do one episode this week. I want to test it out. I'm tired of editing. Doing these 2 episodes a week is kind of getting a little bit too much. But then Tuesday came around, and I'm like, I kind of want to put out an episode on Thursday. So here it is, Wednesday, that I'm recording the episode that you are now listening to, because you know what? Sometimes you just got to listen to your heart, and you just gotta do things. And if you feel inspired to do it, act on it. And I've always been a big person on acting on those moments of inspiration. And it always seems like some of the best things happen when you just act on that gut feeling. And my gut feeling told me to do this question and answer. So who knows? Who knows what will happen from it? Before we get into the questions that people sent, I want to just say, please, if you haven't already, make sure you are following us on social at Dreams and Drive. And you can also use the hashtag when you're listening into the conversation just to engage. I love going in, searching the hashtag, retweeting people's stuff, replying back to people's things. Like, it's so fun to go in and engage. So use the hashtag and make sure to follow us. And also, if you have never checked out the Dreams and Drive site, I highly encourage you to do so. Barry of Podcast in Color actually gave us a shout out on Twitter today and said that she loves Dreams and Drive show notes. So for each episode that you listen to, I have a show notes page on the website where you can get more information. You can go in and tweet different quotables from the episode. You can check out people's social handles, all that good stuff. You won't know about it if you've never visited the site. So please check out the site and visit the show notes. We also have a resources page that has some worksheets, tip sheets, an ebook, marketing ebook that I made about a year ago that you can also download for free. And it's really helpful, especially if you are trying to get started with your dream driving journey and just need some pointers and some insight and some tips. Those are some great resources. That's dreamsanddrive.com/free. So I don't want to make this episode super long, and I don't actually have a huge list of questions because, as I said, I kind of did this episode last minute. So I put something out on Twitter, and I'm just going to respond to the people that sent me questions that I didn't get to last time, and also just what people put out on Twitter. I want to start doing some different things with the podcast. I think for a long time, I've kind of have been hiding behind my guest. As you know, I love interviewing. I love speaking to people, but it's been kind of scary for me to actually put my own voice out there more. I know I'm a good speaker. I know what I'm talking about, but it could just kind of be a little bit nerve-wracking at times. So this is going to be my practice with me just doing some more one-on-one speaking, because you guys, I want to do events. I want to do more webinars. So I need to get the practice. So let me know what works. Let me know what doesn't work. Let me know if you have any other suggestions or anything like that. I am all game and ready to hear it. So let's go into our first question. This one is coming from Danny of Danny Dares, and she asked me this question on Instagram. And her question was, what are some women in media and podcasts that you're inspired by? And I actually think that is a great question because I actually wanted to do a post and write about it for like another site and kind of use it as a link back to my site about women in podcasting that I really admire, especially from a woman in business perspective. To be honest, I listen to a lot of business, inspirational, motivational podcasts. So this is my genre. I'm going to tell you the list of podcasts that I love. Sorry if I don't mention yours or if there's one that I haven't heard of. I'm just going to kind of talk about the ones that I have heard about, okay? So let's get started with the list. Some of these are ones that if you listen to this podcast, you probably listen to some of these too. So number 1 on my list is I love Side Hustle Pro by Nicola Matthews, one of my favorites to listen to every week. I love Alex L's Hey Girl podcast. It's the bomb. I love Hashtags and Stilettos with Sakita Holly. My Taught You podcast. Job Logs is another one. The Reset podcast is another one. Support is Sexy. Behind the Brilliance. Carry On Friends. Table Talk with Toddy. Kashira's Bombshell Diaries. Alex Wolf's Grace Radio. That is so bomb. I love that one. I love Am I Allowed to Like Anything? I also love Mattyology. She hasn't posted in a while, but you can listen to her back episodes, and those are filled with great, great content as well. I love Think and Grow Chick, her podcast, the Brown Ambition podcast. And then the last one that I want to add to this list is How Does She Do It? By Tiffany Sutherland. That is another great podcast if you're interested in business. So yeah, I'm going to list all of those in the show notes. So if you want to see the ones that I listed, just go there. And there are so many other ones. And I'm sorry if I didn't mention yours. These are just ones that I've probably listened to within the last month or two. And they're all hosted by really great women who are doing great things. And as someone who's a podcaster in this genre, I think it's really important to support other people that are out there doing things. So these are the podcasts that have inspired me. Now, women in media, I want to say definitely Oprah. Definitely love Oprah. She's like every girl in media's dream. And it's funny, I think another person that has inspired me is, her name is Sandra Rice, and she was part of the executive team, or she is part of the executive team at the Emma Bowen Foundation. And if you guys know, if you have listened to the podcast before, you know that I was a part of a program called the Emma Bowen Foundation that matches minority students interested in media with a media company for 4 years. So my partner company was CBS Corporation, and Sandra was just always on my back every summer to just make sure that I really maximize all the opportunities that were presented to me. She was just a great figure to me. And I think she's someone who has really inspired me, because even as a bright-eyed recent high school graduate, she saw something in me. And I think having someone that sees something in you is so important, especially when you're just starting out, and always having her encouragement, being able to call her and say, hey, Miss Sandra, like, I'm experiencing this. I don't know how to do this. Can you help me introduce me to this person? She just was so, she loved what she did, and she loved her scholars, Emma Bowen scholars. So she's just someone who I have to say inspires me as somebody who started out as a media intern, and now I am having my own media company, or building my own media company. So the second question that you had was, what have been some of your favorite wins since starting your career journey? So my career journey started, was it June 5th, 2013, when I graduated from Princeton. And there have been so many things that have happened to me since then. So it's really hard to say what have been some of my favorite wins. And some of the things I don't even remember. You know how that is. Like, things just happen and you don't always remember it. But I remember there was a point where, I want to say maybe a year and a half after graduating, Princeton paid me money to come back and to teach or to talk to a class. And I was just like, what? They think have a story? That was one of my early career wins that I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I remember getting to write for Madame Noir and starting to interview celebrities and different entrepreneurs, and just knowing that people liked my questions and they would share my stuff. That was a really cool career win. I think launching Dreams and Drive was probably one of my favorite wins, just because, as I said in a lot of the interviews, I never was as consistent with my dream before. And just seeing how much it has blossomed has really encouraged me. I think getting featured on iTunes, the iTunes podcast homepage, 32 episodes in, was another great career win for me, just because that started from a conversation that I had, and someone was really intrigued. And I think he believed in the concept and believed in my vision and believed in the belief that I had in the vision. And that's so important. I think you can have a vision, but do you actually believe your vision? And can you sell your belief in your vision? And if you're able to sell your belief in your vision, so many things will happen to you. And that's something that I've been realizing in my own life, is that being able to articulate your vision and having that passion that is infectious is going to be important. So important. So how do you really sell a vision? How do you articulate a vision and connect with people? Well, I just said it. I think when you're trying to sell your vision, you have to figure out what's your why. You have to figure out what's the bigger idea that you're connecting to or that you're trying to solve. And with Dreams and Drive, I remember when I was speaking to the guy from Apple Podcasts, I had to hone in on my why. I had to kind of tell him a little bit about my backstory and why I think we all deserve a chance to follow our dreams, and we all deserve a chance to believe in our dreams, and we all deserve the chance to give our dreams a chance. And that's a universal theme, right? I read this book once that this Princeton alum sent me. It was called Understanding the Writer's Journey, or I think that's what it's called. But basically, it's about mythic structure and the archetypes, themes or motifs that are in stories. And that's a huge, the desire to fulfill something is something that is a basic human element. And I think when you're able to articulate what part of the human journey are you trying to connect to, that's going to be an important part of how you sell your vision. Figure out what bone, what thread, what teardrop are you trying to connect with, or what teardrop are you trying to paint when you're selling your vision, and people will believe in it. So hopefully that's not a little bit all over the place, but those are some of the major career highlights. There's probably a lot more, and I probably just can't remember it, but that's something that came to mind. All right, so the next question is coming from AJ again. And it's funny because on Twitter, AJ is a dedicated Dreams and Drives listener. He's one of the people who always comment on SoundCloud on an episode, and I always look forward to hearing or seeing his comments. And he mentioned, maybe you should do some behind the scenes conversations with guests, and update on if your sister started listening to the podcast, and do you keep in touch with guests? All right, so I'm going to do two parts of that. Update on if my sister started listening to the podcast. So if you guys just started listening, you may not know, but I did a podcast with my sister, Naima Campbell. It was actually on Christmas Day, and I was at her house, and we were making breakfast, and I'm like, hey, Naima, let's do a podcast. And I kind of took her by surprise, and we did a podcast, and it's on episode 52, and it's called The Best Gift You Can Give Yourself. And it actually turned out to be a really great podcast. And she shared a lot, and it's funny because after the episode, I kept asking her, Naima, did you listen to this? Did you listen to it? And she did not listen to it. She really did not listen to it for months. And I've had some guests who don't listen to the podcast. And I'm just like, wow. I feel like people don't like hearing their voice. Sometimes I don't like hearing my voice, but I just try to listen just for the sake of knowing how to share it. And so I had publicly called her out on not listening to it. And she finally said she did listen to it. And I think she's getting a little bit annoyed of me saying that. So I will no longer say that my sister did not listen to the podcast episode that we did, because she did listen to it. And do I keep in touch with guests? Now, I am a big believer in building and cultivating relationships. So yes, I definitely do keep in touch with guests. I'm going to tell you how. So Wise, he's my Facebook friend. He's episode 80. We definitely have kept in touch since the podcast. Allie, episode 79. She was my friend before the podcast. So we definitely are text buddies, and I'll, always connect with her that way. It's actually funny. Melody, episode 77 guest, she texted me after our interview and said that she liked the interview. And I took that as an opportunity to save her number. And so when the episode aired, I sent her a text personally and said, thank you so much. I told her about some of the things that I implemented in Dreams and Drive after hearing her give her advice. So now I feel like that will give me a reason or a way to follow up with her. Barry, episode 75, of course, I keep in touch with her because I'm always tweeting her. She's always tweeting me. And I don't know if I can say it yet, but I'm going to be part of something that she's doing later this month on my birthday, actually. Episode 74 guest, Gabrielle Simpson. She's my mentor, so I definitely keep in touch with her. She actually texted me this morning. Rob Hill Sr. So I remember when I first did an interview with him, he was very kind online with sharing it. He even made a tweet, an Instagram post with a quote, and it's probably on his Instagram if you scroll all the way through. I'm like, wow, he liked the interview. And I don't stay in touch with him, but I'll retweet his stuff every now and then. And when I actually tweeted him to ask him if I could repost the interview on Dreams and Drive, the interview that we did 2 years ago, he tweeted me back ASAP and said, yeah. So I feel like staying top of mind and staying relevant allowed him to have that really quick response. Are there other people that I stay in touch with? I haven't spoken to Trent Shelton since doing the podcast. Courtney Futch, episode 60 and 59. That's my girl. If you follow her on Snapchat, she's always making really good food. Tola Lawal. She texts me to check up on her podcast stats. Kashira, I'm always talking to her online. Yeah, I really do try to keep in contact with people. Like, as I said, doing interviews was not only because I wanted to do interviews, it was also a strategic move. I wanted to build relationships with people, and what better way to build relationships with people than by interviewing them and creating a platform to tell their story. Not saying they're forever indebted to you, but we spent an hour of our lives talking about things together. I feel like that's a great start of a conversation, and it's up to me to continue that. It's not up to the guest to cultivate the relationship at that point. If they want to, they can. But I feel like because I invited them on the show, and they're people that I see as valuable, that I see as I want to get to know further, it is part of my Dreams and Drive mission to make sure that it doesn't end here. All right, so let's go to another question. And so this question is coming from Dom. And she says, when faced with challenges and discouragement, how have you overcome those times along your podcast journey? That's probably a bad way to recap her question. But basically, she's asking me, when I have been faced with challenges and discouragement, what have I done? And to kind of frame this within my podcast journey. So this is a good question because it's something that, as she said, I ask my guests this all the time. And there have been a lot of challenges that have kind of faced me over the past year or so of building the brand. I think a lot of them have been more like mental or more self challenges. And it's really the challenges of overcoming fear and doubt and overcoming moments of plateau. And I actually talk about plateau in episode 81, but I think it's something that is very real if you're a content creator, if you're not a huge brand, if you're kind of building something from the scratch. It's like, what do you do when you don't see growth? What do you do when you're putting episodes out for months and you're only getting, your views aren't going up? You feel like you're not reaching anyone. It can be very disheartening, but I think something that I had to really tell myself, and this is going to sound cliche, but it works, is you have to keep going. You can't give up. Because I remember before I got the iTunes feature, I wasn't really getting that many downloads per episode. And I had one conversation that really changed the future of the podcast. It was getting featured on iTunes. It was then getting featured in Black Voices in Business. And that initial little boost made the world of difference. But what if I had said, all right, I give up on this podcast. It's never going to work. No one's listening to it. I'm just going to give up. I would have never kept emailing people. I would have never kept LinkedIn stalking people. Like, I wouldn't have found the guy who works at Apple Podcasts and emailed him and done all that stuff. I would have just given up. So I had to keep reminding myself to get out of my own way. And just like other challenges, like I remember, well, the point that I want to say is you have to be committed to figuring out a solution and not letting a problem be the end. So towards the end of the year, I was actually had a different computer. So I record this podcast on my MacBook Pro, and I had an old MacBook Pro that I had been using from my college years. So from when I bought it in August of 2010 when Apple was still giving out free iTouches with laptop purchases. So anyway, I bought that computer. It lasted me all through college. And I was using it on my bed one day, and I was getting a little sick. So I remember I was editing the episode with Stephen Hart, and thinking about it now, I have Jamaican parents, and my father believes in crazy gluing things if they break. So I was using this cup that I didn't know was a crazy glue cup, right? So I'm drinking this tea, and I'm like, I have it on the side of my bed, and I'm editing my podcast, and I lift up the handle, and the teacup and the handle and the cup separate. The tea goes splashing on my computer. The computer goes dead. I have an episode that has to get up the next day. I was freaking out. But whose fault was it, right? I really shouldn't have been probably drinking right by my computer. It's kind of my fault. I thought about all the episodes that hadn't gone up yet. So the episode with Amber Aziza, the episode with Nicole Walters, with Kashira, all these really great episodes, Yolanda Ross, those were all on my computer because I hadn't put it on Dropbox. I was cheap and I didn't buy the unlimited Dropbox. So I just had like the standard 2 gigabytes that it comes with. And I hadn't uploaded the raw files onto an extra drive or something. And my drive that backs up my computer, I hadn't plugged it in my time machine on my computer for like 2 weeks. So that stuff would have all been gone. And I was just so devastated. But then I'm like, you know what? It's not the end of the world, Raina. You could figure this out. You could figure it out. And I figured it out. I asked my cousin, I'm like, hey, do you know anybody who fixed laptops? I knew that it couldn't have been I knew that with Apples, it probably was just something with the actual switches inside the computer, that my hard drive was really all that really mattered. So if I could get to my hard drive and get those files off my hard drive, everything would have been good. So the next day, I found this guy who works about 2 miles away from me. He transferred my hard drive files onto an external hard drive. Good thing I work at a place, my job, we have a Mac. So I was able to get the files, re-edit that episode with Steven, and it went up. And the guy who fixed the computer actually ended up, clearing out my old computer, making it faster, and he gave me like 3 more months of life from that MacBook Pro. And now I finally bought a new computer to do podcasting on, and put it as a business expense and all that stuff. So this is just a story to say, like, you have to be committed to figuring it out, and that's something that I have really kept in mind when I've faced challenges. Is like, is this really a challenge that's going to end me? Or is this just a moment in your life when you have to figure out what you have to do next? And for me, figuring out the solutions has always been something that kind of like turns me on and kind of makes me excited again. So once I realize, and once I kind of step out of that, self-pity mode, it's like a light bulb goes out and I'm able to overcome it. And I think something else that, I don't really talk about personal things a lot on the podcast, but life happens, and things have happened to me over this past, year of doing the podcast that I don't really talk about, but I know in some episodes, and this can actually be combined with AJ's question about some of the behind the scenes conversations. There have been things that have not made it to air in, podcast, things that I've talked about with guests that have been more of like therapy sessions for myself. Or sometimes when a guest will bring up something and I'll say, wow, that happened to me too. Or wow, I know where you're coming from with this. You realize that life happens to us all. We all experience things, and knowing that we are not alone is something that has really helped me through those challenging times. Like, you are not alone. And I think that's why it's so important to share our story, to share our, share our voices. And you don't always have to share it publicly, but just things that I've been able to talk about with guests off the mic, behind the scenes when we're not recording, have kept me going. And maybe one day I'll talk about some of those things, but right now I'm not at a point where I really want to talk about those things. But just know that life happens to us all. Rainy days happen to us all. There's not always sunshine, but you just have to know, and one of my friends has this tattooed on her, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. And I always think about my mother. And if you guys listen to the podcast, you know the whole story with my mother about how, I was in a car accident and it left her. I was in a car accident when we were younger. I was 10 months, probably less than, I don't really remember. She was probably like 33 and she became permanently disabled from one moment. One moment changed her entire life. And it's funny that that was a car accident, right? And how this podcast is called Dreams and Drive. I don't know, maybe it's ironic, maybe it was destiny in some ways, but my life almost ended in a car crash when I was like 10 months old. I had a fractured skull, had to go to the neurologist for the beginning of my life, like for years, every month to have CAT scans and just make sure that my skull was healing. And I remember in first grade, my teacher, Miss Tyndall, I told her about how I was in a car accident and she told me, that's why you're so smart. And she said, you're special and things like that. Like, I don't even know how this relates to the question, but this is where my mind is going with this. Is just life happens to us all, and life is not always promised. So it's what you make it, right? It's what you make it, and you can make it, but you got to be committed to figuring out a solution and be committed to knowing that the way you're feeling right now is not going to last forever. And that's something that has really, really, really helped me. All right. So let's do one more question. And I'm actually going to pull this one. It's not a question, but it's just a conversation that I had with my friend on my way home from work today that I want to talk about. So we were just talking about the power of how you say things and the power of branding when you are trying to build your brand, when you're a lifestyle, when you're creative. So let me set up the scenario for you. So we both have a mutual friend who's a trainer, and this mutual friend of ours posted on Facebook and was like, I really need an assistant, but I can't afford one. Does anyone want to work for me for free in exchange for training? And we were just going in like, why would this person ever say this? Number one, you're saying you need an assistant, but you can't afford one, right? Okay. And then you're saying, does anyone want to work for me for free in exchange for training? Okay. I get what he's trying to do, but I think for me, as someone who works in marketing and branding, there's such a better way that you could have framed that number one, wouldn't make you look cheap and wouldn't make it seem like the person who is working with you is going to get the bad end of a deal, right? So we were just talking about different ways that he could have approached this. And this is what we came up with. What if he said, right? He said, hey, I'm currently seeking a intern who will work with me and learn some more about how to be a personal trainer. In exchange, I will offer you personal training services. Now, he didn't talk about how he couldn't afford an actual assistant. He communicated the value that this person would give, right? And it just made him seem a lot more legit and not just someone on Facebook ranting about his woes and then trying to, come up with a solution that didn't really seem like the person was really going to get anything out of it. And I think when you're building a brand, it can be so easy to just type the first thing that comes to mind, but you have to remember branding and perception is everything. Like it's everything. Your words matter. Your words matter. And it's funny because Victoria of She's Candid wanted me to talk about professionalism via email and how sometimes she gets emails from companies that are very unprofessional. And I think sometimes the way we write about ourselves and the way we communicate our business is so important. everything that you put out there is a representation of your brand. So you have to say yourself, hey, do I want someone to screenshot this and then have this as a forever reminder of how I spoke to them? So always beware if you're online and you're making a request, be very critical of how you are making that request, because it could hurt your brand. Like, I would not want to work with that trainer, or I would never want, if I was somebody who was very willing and looking to be an assistant for a trainer, I probably would not be turned on by the way that he approached that situation. And that's just something that I think a lot of us have to keep in mind. There's a way to really communicate what it is that you want, but you have to really be actively thinking about it. And I think sometimes as creatives, we may not be actively thinking about how we're portraying things. We may not actively be thinking about the power of words. And that's why I think a number one skill that we can never stop learning is the art of communication. The art of being able to use words to really convey meaning. And if you're not good at it, and if you know that you're not good at it, maybe you have someone else do that part of your business for you. Maybe you have someone work with you in that part of your business. So that's just something that I wanted to say. And it was just a conversation I think a lot of us can kind of think about more, is how are we saying what we're saying? And is that how we want to be perceived? And sometimes you have to take a step back and look at it. And in regards to email etiquette, as Victoria wanted me to talk about, and this is going over the time limit that I wanted to spend with the question and answers, I want to say, no matter who you're talking to, always keep it professional. Always have an intro. Every email, even if I'm replying to you, I will say, hey, so-and-so. Don't use text languages in emails. Have an intro, be clear and concise in what you're saying, make sure things are spelled right, and have a signing off, talk to you soon, and then put your name. I just think when you're always professional in your emails, people will take you seriously. Even if you're asking the most mundane things, your email etiquette is part of your branding. And I hate when people send me like 2 words responses to professional emails that I sent them. I'm like, wow, I'm trying to show you that this is very serious, or what I'm trying to communicate with you is serious. And I automatically kind of judge people when they just send me crazy responses and, one letter, they spell you with the letter U. And it's just like, listen, if you don't know how to write emails, maybe you shouldn't be on email. Just call people. And even then, when you call people, always be professional as well. And I think some people just don't know that. And I think it's something that you may not even know that you're supposed to know. So if you're someone who's guilty of this, take some time to read up on proper email etiquette. Make sure you have your signature with correct links. I love YStamp as an email signature generator that I use. I don't pay for it. I use the free version. So I have a little logo thing at the bottom, but oh well, it serves a purpose and all my emails are branded accordingly. All right. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this listener question and answer. I enjoyed speaking it. I enjoyed doing it. I'm going to try to do more of these, and I definitely feel a lot more comfortable doing this one than I did, episode 81. So give me feedback. Let me know what you think about it. Make sure to follow us on social at Dreams and Drive, and make sure to use the hashtag Dreams and Drive. If you haven't subscribed already, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Google Play, TuneIn, whatever app you're listening to, hit that subscribe button so that you get updates every time we have a new episode. Now, this is something else that I want to ask people to do, and I'm going to see if anyone does it. I'm going to retweet, and you're going to be my favorite person ever if you do it. Share this episode. Share the podcast. If you love Dreams and Drive, if you have a favorite episode, share it in some way on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Share it. Tag us. I actually love seeing when you guys share stuff. So, yeah. So that's it for episode 82. Episode 83, you guys, is going to be so epic. It's going to be the only episode that's released that week or next week. It's going to be with my good friend, my dear friend, Mackenzie Dawkins from Princeton. She is a YouTuber. She's a digital influencer. She has a great story. And we talk about on figuring it all out, because people think this journey is easy. People think that everyone has the answers. And sometimes you don't have the answers. Like Sway, we don't have the answers, right? And it's just going to be a really great episode. And I'm just so proud of Mackenzie and all that she's done. She's a dope dancer, dope makeup artist. And she graduated from Princeton with me, or a year after me. And when you go to a school like that, you think you're going to have your life set. You think everything's just going to be handed to you on a gold platter. And that's not what happened. And you guys have to listen to that story. Listen to her share her truth. Listen to her share her journey of finding self. And as I said, this month, I really want to focus on these journeys of finding ourselves, because as a dream driver, I think it's so important to really know yourself. And I think that's one of the things that distinguishes this podcast from other business podcasts is you could go somewhere else and get tactical stuff. You can go somewhere else and get the bolts and the nuts, whatever, the screws, whatever. But I hope that when you guys are listening to Dreams and Drive, you're realizing that these are individuals who have found themselves and are finding themselves. And that's what is the beauty of sharing stories. That's the beauty of putting your dreams in drive. So keep dreaming, keep driving, and we're going to chat again in episode 83.